Hello Yu-Gi-Oh players and welcome to Yu-Gi-Oh! And Business Casual. I'm your host, the RJB0. So today I am finally beginning to make a Thunder Family video series. I've gotten a lot of requests for Thunder Family video series, a couple of recent ones in the past because it is a deck that I have a lot of experience with. I took a Watt deck involving Thunder Family to YCS Seattle. I took a Thunder Family deck to Regional, which got me to Nationals, which I took another Thunder Family deck to. And Thunder Family, I've just played with all the variants, and it's just something I really enjoy doing. So aside from maybe I had a long stint with Gravekeepers, it's probably the deck that I have the most experience with. I did a video series about playing Chain Beat because that was a deck that I enjoyed, and I enjoyed that video series, so I am going to do a series on Thunder Family. Now today I'm going to be doing my top 5 myths about Thunder Family. Yes, my opinions are a little bit outside of the mainstream. They're a little bit fringy, and I understand that they're probably going to be a little controversial, but I welcome that because I want to have this discussion. If you guys think that I'm playing the deck wrong, or that I missed something, or I'm totally crazy, that's a discussion I want to have. But I have had a lot of experience with all the variants, with all the engines, with all the problems with the deck. And I have come to this conclusion. I was kind of inspired to do this because of the Deck Doctor article they had on ARG a little while back, because that basically included, I couldn't stand the version that the guy made because it was following all of the myths that I think people have about the deck. So I'm going to give you guys my top 5 myths about the Thunder Family deck, and they are all basically my opinions, so I'm not just like saying this is the be-all, end-all, but this is what I see. So my first myth, and I think that this is the most prolific, is that the Thunder Family deck is meant to swarm slash spam slash whatever you want to call it, rank 4 Xyz monsters, level 4 monsters, and level 8 synchro monsters. This is a problem that mostly I've seen it with people who are very new to the deck, making profiles on, on YouTube, on DN, or whatever. Because on its face and by its nature, the Thunder Family deck is a steadily paced control deck. Thunder Family is meant to do one thing at a time with one Xyz monster, taking care of whatever the problems are on the field, and hitting your opponent for a little bit of damage. That's kind of how it works. It doesn't spam, and the reason is because with a spam deck, in order to actually swarm the field and be able to justify it and not like wreck yourself, run out of resources, the act of spamming actually has to produce advantage itself. Case in point, Mermails. When you use a Mermail Abyss, the Abyss Megalo, when you summon that Megalo or an Abyss Teus, the cards you discard replace themselves, and then the Megalo or the Teus then searches cards from your deck. So the spamming or the swarming actually sets up plays and adds resources back to your hand, so you aren't depleting your resources entirely when you make those spammy plays, which means you can hit your opponent hard. In the case of Thunder Family, that isn't true. The Thunder Family monsters do not, in the act of spamming themselves or playing them, create advantage, with the exception of kind of Sis Hunter, but I'll get to that in a second. Which means that if you try to swarm, you are going to run yourself out of resources. You're not going to have any options, and you're going to lose, because that's, let's face it, how it works. Which kind of brings me to my myth number 2. The second myth is that the Thunder Family is an engine. Now, this is going to sound a little bit like arguing pedantics, but if you go around calling an archetype an engine, just because it's an archetype and they all work in synergy with each other, that means that the way you think is going to be that they're an engine. The way that other people who you talk to about it are going to think of it as an engine. And it's just frankly not true, because while Thunder Family does meet one of the criteria of being an engine, which is consistency, creating consistency for the deck, always having plays for the deck, which the Thunder Family definitely does, it does not produce advantage, which is the thing that an engine has to be able to do. You have to actually gain something. You have to gain advantage of your opponent in some way in order for a set of things to be an engine. Now, it is true that Thunder, or Sis Hunder, I'll get to Thunder Seahorse in a second, does recycle resources. And yes, that it does create that +1. Yes, it does create advantage to a degree, since you can use it to get that, to do that recycling card for free, and then you can overlay for the Xyz. It makes a 1-for-1 Xyz, and the Xyz can produce advantage by way of using Paladynamo to make a monster useless, or using Black Ship of Corn or something of the sort. So yes, Thunder Seahorse does produce advantage. However, the problem with Thunder Seahorse is the advantage it produces doesn't meet the other criteria of being an engine, which is that Sis Hunder, did I keep saying Thunder Seahorse? Anyway, Sis Hunder is a card that you're at max in a duel only going to use 3 times. Because, you know, you have recycling batteries, you have Sis Hunder, etc. You have your 2 Sis Hunders if you run them at all, which means that the use of Sis Hunder to produce advantage is going to be inconsistent. You have to actually get it out first, which requires extracting via Thunder Seahorse or something else, which means that the cards do not, in and of themselves, do not produce consistent advantage, which doesn't make them bad, don't get me wrong. I absolutely love the deck, and the Thunder family is absolutely essential, seeing as it is the center of the deck. And it does work since it creates plays. However, it does not produce consistent advantage, which is why you can't really count it as an engine, which is why you run other engines in it, and I'll get to that in a second. The next thing, I have to actually, the next big myth, and this has to do with Thunder Seahorse, which is a very important card to the deck. A lot of people would say that it is the most important card to the deck, and that is absolutely fine. That makes a lot of sense. It tutors basically all the monsters that you're going to be using. It gives you advantage. It's extremely consistent. It's really hard to stop. So Thunder Seahorse is really good. But in the article, and I've seen this before, they take it a little too far. A lot of people think that if you do not get Thunder Seahorse, you lose the game. Which, I think in any deck, if you are relying on one card, and if you don't have that one card, you lose the game, you're in some serious trouble. So, yes, Thunder Seahorse is an extremely important card, but if you think that if you don't get it, you lose, I have some bad news for you. You're doing it wrong. I'm going to put it bluntly, because you shouldn't have to have one card in your hand in order to be able to make the deck work. And there are other ways, yes, I can understand why you would think that, because Thunder Seahorse is the most consistent way for the deck to produce advantage. It gets you all your cards, but there are other ways to do that. If you are needing more consistency, one of my best friends is Photon Thrasher. It isn't a card that you absolutely need to run, but it definitely helps, because what is Photon Thrasher? Well, it's basically a Thunder family monster that can't be Veilered, because it's a light and it's level 4, and you can special summon it from your hand for no cost when you don't have a monster on the board, which means that you can go for that. Your opponent can't hit you with Veiler or even Max C because it's an inherent summon. Then you can summon a Thunder family monster and do those rank 4 Xyz things that you were already going to do, which means that Photon Thrasher adds extra consistency to the deck, which means that you're more likely to be able to get more plays. As far as producing advantage, there are definitely other cards to do it with. There are things like Battery Man AAA and Thunder Seahorse and recycling batteries. These are all ways that you can produce advantage without having Thunder Seahorse in your hand. So that is a problematic myth for a lot of people, where just like, if you think that way, you're just not doing the deck right. The next thing, I'm going to try and speed this up because my other takes took like 15 minutes. That actually leads into my next myth, my 4th myth, which is because people think that Thunder Seahorse is absolutely the most important card in the deck, and you absolutely have to have a Thunder Seahorse in order to operate, they think that Duality is an absolutely necessary card to the deck, which means they're going to be running 3 of it, which means you're going to be running into problems. And the reason why this is a bad myth, and I think it is the worst myth that people have about the deck, because it's extremely common and it's extremely problematic for the deck, because while yes, if you Duality into a Thunder Seahorse, you're in great shape because they both have the same restrictions, which means that Thunder Seahorse can go off in the same turn that you Duality it. Or even better, if you open with a Duality and a Thunder Seahorse, then you can use the Thunder Seahorse and Duality at the same time. That's absolutely great, fine and dandy, all that fun stuff. But what if you don't duality into the Thunder Seahorse? And then you draw the Thunder Seahorse later. What are you going to do? Yes, you use duality, so that ate up a turn. So, because let's think about it. I say it's eating up a turn, but, you know, you can still make plays, right? But the problem with that is that this deck relies so heavily on special summoning from the extra deck that if you're using a lot of cards that keep you from special summoning, it's actually pretty counterproductive to your deck's strategy. So you get the duality, which doesn't get a Thunder Seahorse, and then you draw the Thunder Seahorse. Well, you're not going to just let that Thunder Seahorse sit in your hand, so you're going to use it, which means, yes, you are going to be eating up another turn, which is a problem for this deck, because if you eat up a turn, that means that takes a turn away from you in which you can make a good play, and since this deck relies on steadily producing plays, well, you're in trouble. And the other way is even more of a problem. If you open with that Thunder Seahorse and then you draw duality later, then you've got either a like 1-for-1 deck thinner, which you probably don't need later in the game, that slows you down a turn, or you've got a totally dead card in your hand. So I think that while duality can be a decent choice for the deck, since I used to say all the time that duality and Thunder Seahorse in your hand was basically choose your own hand for the deck, it's actually, in my opinion, a problematic card for the deck. It's actually been a while since I've run duality, and it's the same with Thunder Seahorse, and I have my reasons for that, and I'll get to that in another video. But I want to move on, so I'm just going to leave it there. We can discuss it. I actually think that Card-Cardee, which gets into my next myth, is a better choice than duality. And the reason being, my final myth, is that between Thunder Seahorse, Hunder, and Recycling Batteries, the deck those 3 cards alone produce consistent advantage. Which is not quite true. It is kind of true, and kind of doesn't get you very far in the competitive game. Because let's say you open up with a Hunder, a Hunder, and some back row, which is a pretty common thing for this deck. Well, you've got a Hunder and a Hunder. So yeah, that Hunder could produce advantage, except you don't have a graveyard set up. Which is a problem, because that Thunder Seahorse isn't producing advantage. Now it's just a card that's sitting there in your hand and is an extra fodder for your Thunder Family monsters. So yes, there are a lot of decks that use more monsters than spells and traps in the Thunder Family builds, and yes, that makes sense. That is a decent build. It's a very good build. It isn't the build that I would use, but in that case, you're less likely to have that Thunder or that Hunder in your hand that can't be used. So yes, that Hunder early game isn't very useful. Recycling Batteries is decently useful early game. Since you can use the Hunder, Hunder, go into an Xyz monster. If the Xyz monster dies, you can add that back to your hand with Recycling Batteries for another free Xyz monster. However, then you have the Thunder Seahorse late game, and Thunder Seahorse late game is a problem, because if you have the Thunder Seahorse late game, it's great. If you already used the Thunder Seahorse earlier, then that means you have that advantage that you can work with, which means you can use that Thunder Seahorse just as food for Hunder or Hunder, and for various Xyz things. However, if you didn't have the Thunder Seahorse earlier in the game, you're going to run into some issues, because the Thunder Seahorse is now just a dead 1600 beater in your hand. If you get the Thunder Seahorse early game and the Hunder and the Recycling Batteries late game, you're in pretty good shape. But I'd actually personally say that in order for the deck to run properly, you have to have other cards that produce advantage consistently, like Card-Cardee, and Batteryman AAA is a common choice. However, that runs into a couple of consistency issues. However, it does produce free Xyz monsters, which is pretty great most of the time. My personal choice, and I'll get to this in another video, is the Watt engine. I personally think that the Watt engine is the only way to run the Thunder Family deck. But once again, I will get to that in another video. So I hope you like my 5 myths about Thunder Family and Thunder Family. If you did like the video, hit that thumbs up button. If you didn't, let me know why. I am sorry. Once again, I went to 15 minutes, but I hope the video was informative. So if you want to see more about the Thunder Family, it's definitely something that I want to do. Hit that subscribe button, and comment to me below. Talk about what you think of my top 5 myths and about the deck. Meanwhile, thank you guys for watching Yu-Gi-Oh! And Business Casual. I'm your host, the RJB0, and I got a jet, guys. See ya.